grade school weekly read. You probably never heard it. Do they still have it anywhere, you know?
Yes,
They do. Okay, it's good to know. It's still out there. I read in this thing that the United States exports everything, everywhere. And now I defy you to look at the bottom of your shoe, take out your pencil or your pen or your knitting needle, and look at it. You're going to see the thing was made in China or Korea or Southeast Asia or Taiwan or somewhere else, to the point where we can't make anything. And it's so fresh in my mind, I have to say, as I was riding up here today, I'm going, and I got the memory, I got the, you know, the turn this way, turn that way. I'm going north on US 41. And geez, it's a beautiful country, and I always like Oshkosh, by gosh, because that's where I wanted my genes if I'm a kid, right? And as I'm going through the north end of town, I look over to the right, and what do I see? This sprawling complex. I thought, what gorgeous building, new brick, new zip. And then I see the flags, then I see the turrets. It's a prison. It's a prison. In Illinois, I'm coming back from a family vacation a few years ago, and I'm going through southern Illinois, and down there where Huckleberry Finn and those guys had fun years ago. And I'm coming through the southern Illinois, and I come to this big sprawling thing that looks just like you got in Oshkosh. Big bricks everywhere. I think they got some factory, some manufacturing, something's going on good here. And I drive another 100 feet or so, and I realize, see the fence and the tourists, and it's a prison. Inez, Illinois. Illinois has 33 penitentiaries. California, where this marijuana referendum will be in November, has 171,000 inmates. You guys, Wisconsin, you're paupers. You only have 22,000 inmates. In Illinois, we have 45,000 inmates. Pardon?
You have Cook County.
Yeah, we have Cook County, you know what? And we take those people from Cook County, we arrest them, charge them for these horrible drug crimes, send them to the penitentiary to the point where the guys who killed somebody or raped somebody or some other horrible crime are being evicted because we don't have room for them all in the inn. The prison population, since I was a prosecutor in the early 70s, has multiplied multi times. To the point where we now have the same thing everywhere across the country. We have 1 out of every 100 Americans locked up behind bars because this insane war on drugs. There's no country in the world that has a higher rate of incarceration than the United States. The Pew report came out about 2 years ago now, a year ago, and reported just how bad it was. And when you take a dollar that you're going to give to the government, and the government has the choice, and put it next to the choice you tell them not to take, guess what you're going to have? You're going to have kids taking the course that you don't want them to take. And then, of course, we have law enforcement that catches these kids because they're going to save our kids from drugs, right? Politicians got used to voting for this drug war stuff because I'm going to save your kid from drugs. Drugs are bad. We all agree. You know, drugs are not something we're anxious to see people use. Drugs are dangerous. Drugs are addictive. But to the politician, I'm going to save your kids. Vote for me. The other guy from the other party, independent, whomever, he's going to save your kids from drugs too. But in fact, has it saved us from drugs? Well, it hasn't. We had this last September, talking about marijuana, 2 miles from my home, a Mexican drug cartel comes in and plants 6,000 marijuana plants 2 miles from my 15-year-old son. How does that help save my son or the neighborhood's kids from drugs? I mentioned a minute ago the best heroin you get is 2%. Now, 40 years later, you get 90% pure heroin on the west side of the city of Chicago. Kids from downstate Illinois coming up and buying the drugs to go have parties with high school kids with these prohibited substances. So I was unsuccessful in my political campaign, but I was doing the same thing that we're trying to do here today. We're trying to awaken this latent knowledge that's already laying there at the back of people's minds. People know that the war on drugs doesn't work. I challenge you to go out over the weekend, today's Saturday, right? Over the weekend, and ask people that you run into, strangers, neighbors, relatives, the guy who's going to give you the cup of coffee this afternoon, the waitress. You know what is the war on drugs working? Oh, it's a joke, right? Universally, the people realize that the war on drugs is not working and in fact makes things worse. People realize it. The problem is to get them to talk about it amongst each other and say, well, we recognize it doesn't work, so what are we going to do instead? Is there something that we can try? Something other than prohibition, something other than what Al Capone likes. As long as we put this thing up here, this is, I talked to Northwestern Law School here last week, and this was the undergraduate thing, but the point that I often make when I go give these talks are that, number one, the war on drugs doesn't work. Number two, even worse, or at least equally bad, is that the war on drugs is basically the heart of nearly any crisis you can name in America. You pick the crises, the war on drugs makes it worse. And then thirdly, the point that I try to make when I go talk to these audiences is that why is that? That we have a drug war that doesn't work. And for 40 years, we've continued it. From President Nixon until now, and every president since has been supportive of the war on drugs. If something doesn't work, why don't we end it? You know, why has it survived? Alcohol prohibition only lasted 13 years, and we could see that it was putting Tommy guns in the street, and the bootleggers, and violence, and the gangs, and all the same things that prohibition has created again. But we were 13 years smart compared to 40 years dumb. All right, well, so those are the 3 points. But let's flip us. We got a thing, clicker? Okay, I can feel like I'm in control.
You got to aim it at the USB over here.
Your son I was telling you about, he doesn't let me have this at home. That's why I come to these. But by the things that I tell people is, no matter what I'm saying, in no instance am I saying that the drugs are good or am I encouraging their use. Drugs are dangerous, addictive, often lethal. But if drugs are bad, the war on drugs is worse. The irony is, Al Capone was in favor of the prohibition of alcohol. It was his business, but he was in favor of prohibition. Pablo Escobar is the other guy. He was a Colombian drug dealer, one of the 7th richest people in the world, according to Forbes, multi-billionaire. He was in favor of the prohibition of drugs. Why are these guys in favor of the prohibition? Because it's the foundation for their business. Now, if the bad guys are for prohibition, wouldn't you think that the good guys are going to be on the other side of the fight? You know, if the bad guys are for it, well, I'm against it. But is that what happens? Well, no. But the trouble with the drug war, point one, is that it doesn't work. As evidence that it doesn't work, here's one seizure of cocaine in Chicago, and that's our superintendent of police, and I just kind of like the way this snowfort of cocaine encircles the city, because that's exactly what it does. So, proof it doesn't work. Here, and if you didn't like that last one, here's 40,000 pounds of drugs seized at one time off the coast of South America. When you see these pictures on TV and so forth of huge seizures, recognize that a large drug seizure is evidence of drug war failure, not of drug war success. The bigger the seizure, the bigger the evidence of failure. So Leap says that the war on drugs puts more drugs everywhere. Uncontrolled, unregulated drugs, contaminated drugs, drugs which are really controlled and regulated by the drug gangs and the drug cartels. They decide where the drugs will be sold. How old do you have to be to sell them? Do you have to have a membership in the gang? Are you going to be armed? How strong are the drugs? What are they going to be cut with? Is there going to be any warning on the packaging? Well, that's a laugh. All right. So what the irony of prohibition is when you prohibit something and you make it illegal, you give up the right to control the substance. You can't say heroin is bad. Heroin is prohibited. Don't use the heroin. But if you choose to disregard this warning, do not exceed the recommended dose. No sense at all. So why doesn't the drug war